War Between Worlds, Chapter 30, Energetic. The alarm leading them to Bauman's store ended up confirming that the chupacabras were real. It also resulted in 2 other aliens attacked by them. The team split up, Zack and Fisk going with Jen and Rook, following the chupacabra's trail to Undertown. Zack frowned. They definitely came this way, but I can't sense them anymore. Jen frowned, turning to Zack as she walked. She didn't draw as much attention here in Undertown. The aliens here were used to seeing her. A few here and there waved, and Rook couldn't help but notice the slight jealousy in Zack's eyes when that happened. So, you have telepathy? Jen asked, and Zack frowned. I used to have a few powers, but we thought they all disappeared when Argos croaked. He sounded quite concerned, but before they could run through ideas about why his powers might be returning, an explosion plumed to their left. As it turned out, Argos had been resurrected, somehow, by Dr. Animo. Jen, Rook, Zack, and Fisk tracked down their hideaway, only to be attacked by a Frankenstein cryptid. No sooner had they dealt with that than they got word that the airship was being attacked. They hopped back onto the large electric trike Fisk was driving, and Jen couldn't help but appreciate the craftsmanship on the vehicle. She'd spent far too long with Kevin to not recognize a custom job when she spotted one. But when she commented on it, Zack frowned. I'd trade the trike and the airship for some credit next time I save the world. Most of the time, people put what we do down to a natural disaster. He frowned as Jen chuckled. I miss those days. Trust me, Zack. Fame is not all it's cracked up to be. Most of the time, it's a royal pain in the ass. I've had to run from reporters almost as much as from bad guys these days. That made Zack look thoughtful as they raced out of Undertown and up into Bellwood. The airship was under attack, but Doc and Drew had managed to get everyone out. The fight with Argos wasn't going well. Jen and Zack double-teaming him while Rook, Doc, and Drew took on the Frankenstein cryptids. Zon, a pterosaur, and Komodo, a Komodo dragon, took out Animo easily, but Zack and Jen weren't having much luck. Jen pulled Zack back to his feet. He's powered by the life forces that were stolen from the aliens. If we had a way to re-extract that energy, we could win this, Zack stated, frustration evident in his voice, but Jen's eyes glimmered with excitement. You have no idea how lucky you are I have this alien. Keep him distracted for a minute. Zack nodded and drew Argos' attention enough for Jen to get around behind him and transform into feedback. She absorbed the stolen energy from Argos and re-released it back into the world. It dissipated quickly as the Frankencryptids came back to themselves, fleeing the city. The plumbers were quick to arrive and collect the husk that had been Argos. Jen frowned. He hadn't really been alive, at least according to Animo's notes, but it still felt wrong to watch the plumbers drag off the creature. Zack pulled her into a hug, distracting her. She returned it and spotted Rook's face over Zack's shoulder. His eyes left her the instant he realized she was looking, but she had seen the jealousy in them. Jen pulled back from the hug. Press will be here soon if you want it, Jen said. Zack looked to his parents. They frowned, but made no comment. Zack shook his head. Nah. Cryptids need to be kept a secret for their own protection, against people like Animo. Jen nodded, smiling. She'd been hoping Zack would see that before he had to learn the hard way, that sometimes anonymity had its perks. One favor, though? Can we get a picture with you as an alien? I have got to show my Uncle Doyle. He's a huge fan. Jen laughed as Zack held up his phone. Rook frowned. I do not understand why you need a picture with her aliens. I am an alien. Technically, to me, you are all aliens. Rook said it almost under his breath, and Jen laughed lightly. You're a wonderful alien, Blonko. She pulled him down by the collar and kissed him, leaving him blinking. She took Zack's phone from him and handed it to Rook before spinning the dial on the Omnitrix. Rook seemed more than happy to take the photo after that. Once that was done, they bid goodbye to the Saturdays, heading off to the proto-truck while they took off for their damaged airship. Jen frowned at Rook as they loaded into the truck. Why were you jealous of Zack? She asked. Her partner had never been so good with subtle hints. He frowned. You have so much more in common with him than we have with each other. Zack shares knowledge of what it is like to be a hero from childhood. And what it's like to be hunted from a young age. No offense, but I'm glad you don't know what that feels like. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. She sighed, looking down at the Omnitrix. I can't say I regret most of what I've been through, but I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I'll admit it can be nice to talk to people who know what it's like. Gwen, Kevin, and I used to joke about it all the time, but trust me, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Rook frowned. It's not a good thing, Jen clarified. I see. I may not fully understand but if you wish, you can always speak to me about these things. Jen nodded and grinned, pecking Rook on the cheek. I know. Now come on, there's a Sumo Slammers marathon with our name on it. He smiled at her as they made their way back to base. Chapter 31, Major Headaches. Jen grumbled as she rooted around in the medicine cabinet in her bathroom on the base. The last few days had given her the biggest migraine she'd had since being dosed with alien drugs under Incursion. First, she'd had to manage a treaty signing as Gravitac. They had refused to meet with her just as Jen, which made sense since one of the members of the party of delegates sent a group of flea-sized aliens to destabilize Gravitac's core, which should have caused an explosion big enough to take out half of the base. If Blue Kitchen Dreba hadn't temporarily shrunk Rook down, she might not have known what was happening until too late. But they had managed to catch the Woden responsible, Poltroon, one of the delegates, who'd wanted to start a war with the Apoplexians. He was currently lounging in a cell several stories below her. They had no idea what had become of the flea-like aliens, but Jen had showered about 7 times in an attempt to ensure that they were no longer on her. But that had not been the weirdest thing that happened. No, that award went to her mother inviting her over for dinner, which through the day somehow became her mother becoming great friends with Ma Vriedel. She still wasn't sure how those things resulted in each other, if she was honest. But she was sort of glad. Ma Vriedel scared even Vilgax, if the legends were true. With her as a friend, Sandra Tennyson became basically untouchable. Cons were that sometimes one of the people who tried to kill her a few times came over for dinner. She could live with that. She'd teamed up with Kevin, after all. And it wasn't like she strictly lived at home anymore. She exclaimed in triumph as she found the bottle she was looking for. It was bright purple and had her name on it. The rest was written in Galvan, but the doctor on base had told her what it meant. It was basically an overdose warning. These were low-level doses of Vaxasaurian, Humongosaurus species, painkillers. Most species couldn't take even half of one of these without overdosing pretty badly. She was sort of a special case. The Omnitrix had altered her physiology. Even when she was human, she technically wasn't. She didn't like talking about it. Jen shook the bottle, making sure she had enough. The doctor's limit to a single dose she could take was 2 pills. There were enough. But she looked around and swore under her breath. She'd forgotten her water in the other room. Are you well, Jen? It was Rook. From the other room. He was over at her place for a movie night. She was showing him the first Sumo Slammers movie, and he was showing her the TV show he and his roommate had watched at the academy that was supposed to be based on her life. Yeah, I'm fine, just a headache. Without thinking about it, she set the bottle down on the side table as she headed to the small kitchenette to grab a glass of water. Jen! She turned quickly, her hand inching to the Omnitrix. There was panic in her partner's voice. But nothing was wrong. He was standing next to the couch holding her medicine bottle. You have not taken these yet, have you? Who prescribed this? These are exceptionally dangerous for a human. Jen laughed and stepped over to him, taking the bottle from him. Thought you said you'd read my file, Blonko. He frowned. Your file is quite large. I am not to your medical history yet, he admitted, and Jen laughed again. Well, When you get to the medical section of my file, you'll see that these are some of the only pain meds that actually work on me. She popped the bottle open and took 2 pills, swallowing them with a bit of water. Rook still looked concerned. She kissed him gently. It's sweet that you're worried, but it's okay. The doctor on base prescribed them. He's been my doctor since this base opened. He nodded, trusting her judgment. Then he frowned at her wording. What did you do before the base opened? She shrugged. For a while I wasn't wearing the Omnitrix. You know that. It wasn't as bad then. Rook frowned as Jen returned the bottle to the cabinet in her bathroom and sat on the couch. He sat next to her. You put the Omnitrix back on almost 3 years ago. The base in Bellwood has only been properly manned for approximately a year. Rook pointed out, attempting to coax the full truth out of her. She sighed, blushing lightly. Less than, actually. It wasn't fully finished when Ethan died. A flash of pain raced across her face at the mention of her fallen fiancé. But she kept going regardless. Before that, I made do with what I had. I was organizing a counteroffensive to a war pretty immediately after I put the Omnitrix back on. Not a lot of time to worry about myself. Rook frowned and placed an arm around her shoulders. She leaned against him. Things are a bit better these days. Bit easier. Now that there are other plumbers in town. They take care of the smaller stuff. She shrugged. Now come on, let's start the movie. Rook nodded, handing Jen the remote.